Hey everyone and welcome. So this series is going to be about JavaScript and this is just going to cover enough for your interviews. If you are looking for a front-end development role or a back-end development role, this series is going to be very much useful for you. And look at the salaries for JavaScript developers all around the world. It's pretty high. So this is the thing which we would like you guys to focus on, that try to get into a better position from where you are at right now. And that's the reason this course is going to be extremely helpful for you. So without wasting any time, let's get into it. Okay, so let's begin. And for this series, we are just going to use Ripple IT. As you can see, ripplit.com. And here we'll be using the Node Playground. So in case if you are not familiar with how to reach here, you can simply sign up or sign in and you can create a Node project, Node Ripple, and there's no JavaScript here. So you will need to use Node and it should be good to go. Add your eyes and that's it. You will create a new project for you. Perfect. So here we have just the index file. We don't need anything else, so I'll get rid of everything. Okay, so to begin with, every language has a console log, anything which you can print on the in the shell. So we can check here console.log. So anything, if you want to print something on the screen, you can use console log. In different languages, it could be print, it could be system log or something like that. In JavaScript, we have console log. Okay, so here we are going to print hello edurise, something different from hello world. And if you just run it, it's going to display a string. So this is a string, it's not a number, so it's string. Okay, and we can even display numbers here. It could be 1, so I'm going to display a number. You can even display boolean, so true is going to say true here. And there are several other types of data types, but this is one thing I wanted you to know. There are other forms as well, like for example table. There is another one, I guess it's warning message or something like that. So yes, there are several type of consoles, but we are just going to focus on logger at the moment. Okay, second type is about alert message. Something when you type in, it's going to give you a dialog box here, and that's going to tell you what exactly that thing is. It's usually used in just like in development environment. It's never used for production. So alert, the same thing. Hello, edurise, and you just run it. It's going to okay, so alert, it doesn't work from the Ripple, but you can use it in the command line. Let's check this. In the console, if I just type in, I'll clear it, type in alert, hello world. So this is how the alert is going to look like. Okay, perfect. And the last thing I have here is the prompt. Prompt, it has something like this. First thing it takes in is a message, and second thing I'm not sure what exactly it is, but let's check this. Hello, and okay, probably this is not going to work as well. All right, there you go. Here we have hello, but let's go ahead and check in the console. Okay, and let me make it a bit bigger. Prompt hello is going to give you hello, and then there could be something, hey there, something like this, and it's going to print it for you. So prompt is rarely an item which anyone will use in JavaScript, but this is just three things. One we checked is console log. Second was the alert. Alert also not used for production. And the thing, other thing is prompt. So these are the three things which we covered right now. Okay, so data types. We are going to understand about data types. And right now, for the interview purpose and for all the basic purpose, you just need to focus on these four. There are several other data types as well, but at the moment you don't need to worry about that. Even the object one, these are pretty common, but at the moment just focus on undefined, boolean, number, and string. Okay, so if we go into variables, we have three main types of variables. Just remember the data types because we are going to assign those data types to these variables. There are three main types of variables. Let's assign constant name, and this data type is going to be string, this one. Okay, so any name is going to be a string. Any alphanumeric or even some special characters is going to be string. So console log name is going to print out the name. They printed it, right? So this is helpful when you are creating a project in which there is a list. Let's say there's a list of people, name 1, name 2. In this case, you don't need to go ahead and write each and every name here. For example, Rakesh or something like that. All you need to do is just give them a variable name, and it's going to do the trick for you. So right now, just remember, this is how you assign a variable in JavaScript. That's it. Okay, so let's talk about the math operators. There are 5 main type of math operators. One is for addition, minus, multiplication, divide, and modulo. If you don't know modulo what it is, it's just a reminder. So anything, if you divide it by something, what remains is going to be a modulo, or maybe a reminder. Okay, so let's take it by example. 5 divided by 5 plus 5 is going to give us 10. Same thing you already know with minus, so we can do multiplication. It's going to give you 25. Also, if you do a modulo, now the modulo is going to be a bit interesting. So 5 modulo 5 is going to give you 0, and 5 modulo 4 is going to give you 1, because that's a reminder. 4 into is 4 plus 1, which gives you 5, right? So that's why it's going to be 1. If you put in 3, it's going to be 2, and the same thing if you keep on going. But I think you kind of got the idea. Okay, so you can even assign it. So let a equals to 10, let b equals to 20, and console log a plus b. You can do something like this. So it's going to give you 30. You can also use another mathematical operator here. Let's say 10 plus 40. So this is going to be 50, 60, 70. So this will give you 70. So this is how you can use math operator in JavaScript. Okay, so the next operator which we are going to talk about is logical operator. And this will be very much helpful to you when you are doing web development. So there are 3 main types of logical operator. One is AND, one is OR, which is represented by double bar, and one is NOT. Okay, let's take a look at it by example. So if there is true and true, so this is how we are representing AND, and if both the conditions matches, it should give us true. So it's going to give us true. So let's say if we put in false, so if there is true and if the other condition is false, this should give us false, because every condition here should match. Okay, let's try with one more example here, adding to it. So and true. Again, this is not going to be of any significance because we have one false here. Okay, but if I change it to true, this could be different. Okay, so AND is something which is going to accept only true values. Or on the other end is going to accept at least, if there's at least one value which is true, it should give us true. Okay, let's check here. False or false, if both are false, is going to give us false. If even one thing is true, is going to give us true. So this is the significance of OR. So if you can look at it by an example saying that Let's say if at least one of my friend is going to an event, then I should go, right? So if I have 5 friends, if one person or one friend is going to an event, I should be able to go. So this is a condition which I am trying to put. And in that case, we can use or operator. And in this one, if any one of my friend is saying that no, I'm not going to go, my decision would be no as well. So that's the kind of an analogy we can do between and or. While on the other end, if you have a friend whom you don't like, right, and that person is saying that I'm going to go, and if you add a not operator ahead of it, so that means that my friend is going, if he is going, I'm not going to go. So that's what this means. So not true is going to give you false, and the same thing goes for not false. If he is not going, I'm definitely going to go. Something like that. Okay, so this is how you use logical operators. Okay, so the next topic we are going to cover here is about type conversion. And here it's pretty simple. So the type conversion, usually how it works is that in JavaScript, if you assign a number to plus a string number, is going to convert this particular number to string. So the result will be 22. And the same thing goes here in the example. Let's say we have assigned a value which is Boolean true. We check the type of the value, it's Boolean. Now what we do is that we assign value as string of value. This is we are converting the type. So the alert of type of value is going to be string. So before it was Boolean, now it's string. So this is how you convert, and this was the conversion of string. The same thing could go for numeric conversion as well. So let's check it with this example that you have a string, you divide it by 2, and this is automatically going to convert to number, and strings are converted to number because if you do assign this operator divide and with these strings, which the JavaScript engine is going to count it as number because it's totally doable, and hence it's going to be 3, right? Now what you can do here is that you can just use it with number and assign a value to it. So number, and you assign string to it, which is going to be, let's say 62, right? It's going to change it to number 62. This is how you change it. So for example, 123 type of string is string, type of str is string. You assign it, let number equals to number string, and type of number is now is going to be number. So this is how you change the type of your variables in JavaScript. Okay, so the next thing is about the comparison operators. There are 6 types of comparison operators. One is greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, and not equal to. There are several things you need to notice here, which is you might have seen triple equal to and double equal to. So triple equal to is also doing type checking. So let's say if you are doing something like this, let's say for an example, let a, or let's say 2 equal to 2 is going to give us true here. Why? Because this true is not checking for the type. But if I do a triple equal to, it's now going to check for the type and it's going to tell us that no, this is false. Because the types of both of these are different. This is a number and this is a string. Okay, and the rest of them are more mathematical. If you can see here, if it's equal to, and another thing about equal to is you can even check for string. Double is equal to double is going to give us true. And there is nothing we can do about the greater than or less than with string, but you can do it with numbers, as you can already figure out, right? So if it is 5 or greater than or equal to 5, it's going to give us true. If it's greater than or equal to, it's going to give us false. Okay, so this is about the comparison operator.
So the next thing we have here is conditions. So in any programming language, condition is really important because that's a decider that if something should happen or not. For example, if you have a unique token, you should be able to log in to your Facebook account. If not, you cannot, right? So these are the conditions which help you in doing that. Okay, let's take a look at a simple condition. And there are specifically two kind of conditions. One is if else and another is ternary. Ternary is kind of the same thing like if else, but it just have a different format. Okay, so let's take a look at this example. If 4 is greater than 2, print 4 is greater than 2, else print 4 is not greater than 2, right? So we'll simply run it, and right now we have a error because there is nothing like print. We need to have console.log, the same thing, console.log. I have been doing Python lately, so I just wrote print. But see, we have 4 which is greater than 2. Perfect. It can be even 0. So anytime if in a condition if you have 0, it's going to consider this as false. So the basic idea of if is that if this condition is true, it should go here. If it's false, it should go on the other side in the else. Also, you can have another condition which is else if. So it's kind of just a kind of a chain to it. So we'll see something like this. If 5 is greater than 10, then 5 is greater than 10. Else if 5 is greater than 4, console log 5 is greater than 4, which is going to be true, or else console log 5. Okay, so if we run it, it's going to give us, because it matches this condition, right? So it's going to give us the correct thing. Now let's say if I put in 6, it's just going to give me 5 because this condition doesn't match, this condition doesn't match. So in the end, it's going to match it to this condition. So it's going to give us just 5. You don't necessarily need to have an else. Sometime you can simply have if and even else if, but else is just a fallback if sometime if you don't need to, if you need to handle an error, that's the reason you need else in the end, right? So if you don't have anything, it's not going to print anything. All right, awesome. So let's take a look at the ternary operator. The format here is going to be if it is first one is a condition. If it matches, do this, or else if it doesn't match, do this, right? So let's take a look at it by an example. If 5 is greater than 4, if this is true, then 5 is greater, else 5 is not, right? So I think this should not work, or yeah, this worked. Okay, this is just a simple returning. So okay, 5 is greater than 4, which is true, and that's the reason we got 5 is greater. If this is not going to be true, then it's just going to say 5 is not. So this is how you use these conditions. In the future, we will look into this as well. Okay, so the next thing, loop, is the most important here because this is something which you'll use a lot in your interviews. So there are two main types of loop. One is a for loop and another is a while loop. In a for, you can have a specific range, for example 0 to 100, and in a while loop you don't have a range. It is going to execute until the condition matches to true. So let's take a look at it by an example here. So if we want to count a number from 0 to 100, if we use a for loop, it's going to be something like this. For let I equals to 0, there should be a starting point here. I is less than 100, and this should be our end point. And the next thing should be how much should it increment. It should, and this is going to say it should increment by 1. You can even say I greater plus equal to 2. So this is going to increment by 2 numbers. Let's take a look at it by an example. Console log I. Okay, if we do this, it's going to give us, first of all, there might be an error, but okay. So it is incrementing by 2, right? But if I have I++, this is the most standard format, how people do it. So it's going to be something like this, 0, 1, 2, 3. Oh, it's going to be at the bottom. Let's run it now. Okay, perfect. 0, 1, 2, 3. It's going to go from 0 up to 10. This is important when you are trying to run through a list of items, when you have an array and you just try to list through the users and try to find something, right? So that's when this thing comes in handy. The next, there are also other ways to do it. For example, if you want to start with 100 and if you want to end it at 0, so it's greater than 0, and you can even have greater than or equal to 0, and I condition has to be minus minus. So in this case, it's going to print from 100 to 0. If you look at the bottom, yeah, see this? It started with 100 and it's ending at 0. Okay, so another condition, another loop which we have here is going to be while loop. But there is one problem here, which is this condition is true, right? In order to make this condition false, you need to do something about it. So let's say if the same thing, if n is greater than 100, or n is, let's say, less than, not take 100, let's take 10, console log 10. Right now 10 is n is undefined, right? Because we don't have any n. So let's just print out n, and this is going to go, I guess, n is undefined. So let's say let n equals to 0, and let's check it. And this thing is going to go forever and ever and ever. This is the reason sometimes you can you get a message saying that the max stack is full, and this is the reason for it, because we are not incrementing n, and this condition never gets fulfilled. If this doesn't get fulfilled, this is going to run till infinity, right? So what you need to do in order to handle this scenario is that just increment n by 1, something like this, n plus plus, and then run it. Is going to give you 0 till 10. See this? Perfect. So there's the one thing which, why is it showing n 9 twice? Okay, maybe it's returning at the same time it's showing it. Okay, that's fine. So this is how you run the while loop. You can even do something like this. N is 10, n is greater than or less than, not greater than 0, if this is true, and here you can decrement it. So anything which you do here, all you need to take care of is that this condition should have true value at one point. That's the end goal of doing that. This. Okay. This should run. There's some issue while running. Okay, perfect. We got it. Okay, so this is how you do loops, and these are the most popular loops in your interviews. Another better way to handle a condition is through switch. So in this switch, what we do is that the expression or the syntax is going to be something like this. You start it with a bracket or a curly bracket, and you have a case name. So if your expression, if it matches this particular condition, this block will be executed, and then you need to assign break to it. If not, it will check if y matches with this expression. If it does, execute this block. And there should be a default. This is always required. So if any of these conditions they don't match, it should run this block. Okay, so now let's take a look at an example here, and I wanted to give you a real life experience or real world experience. So that's the reason, real world example, and that's why we have this particular switch statement. New date, get date. Let's check what this is going to give us right now. So I'm going to comment this out again, and let's see what do we get here. Okay, we don't need this, and let's try to run it. Perfect. 6 because it is Saturday. Sunday it should be 7. I guess so. That's what I am assuming. Saturday is 6 and Sunday it starts with 0. Okay, So let's take, so now we kind of got the idea that how this should work. So let's try to come out of the switch statement, uncomment it, and let's see. So if switch new date, this is the expression we have. If this matches 0, the day will be Sunday. If it is 1, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and so on. Okay, so let's figure out if it's going to print. Perfect, it printed Saturday, right? So this is how you use a switch statement. Let's say in a case, so you need to have sometime in syntaxing, it's going to ask you that you need to have default. Here we don't have a default, but let's write a default. Default, and this is going to be day equal to undefined. Why? Because let's say we pass in something like 8, and now it's going to give us undefined because none of the conditions matched. Let's say if we just have something like this, it's going to give us nothing because there's no default fallback and this condition doesn't match to anything. In real life, this is important because sometime if you want to check which exactly item it corresponds to, for example, let's take it this way, that if a person is having interest in 3 games, football, cricket, and basketball, if the person doesn't have interest in any one of them, it should say that this person is not interested in games or something like that. And that's the reason we use switch statement in order to find multiple conditions. Another important thing you need to understand here is that you don't necessarily need to use a switch statement. You can either use if else condition. There could be multiple if else, but this is just a better way to do it. Functions. So what do we mean by function? So anytime if you want to reuse a piece of code, you need to use a function. And the syntax of function is something like this. So function, it needs to start with a reserved keyword function. Then it needs to have a function name. After that, these are the parameters. Anything within the parenthesis is going to be your parameter. And within these curly brackets, you can do or you can write your piece of code. So code block will go here. Okay, so right now this function, what it is doing is that it's taking a function name and it's taking 2 parameters, person and the location, and console logging person and the location. So here, in order to call a function, I can do something like this. Function name, open parenthesis. First, I need to type in the name of the person, and second, I need to write in the location. So if I do run, it's going to give you the name and location of the person. So the same thing I can do over and over again without doing any console log because this function already has it for us. Rakesh, Atlanta, and if you run it, it's going to do the same thing for you without writing any console log. There could be multiple things which you can do here, several complex things, and this is the main advantage of the function, that it helps you reuse your code. Okay, so we already know what a function is. Now what is an arrow function? So in ES6 it was launched that in a better way, if you want to write a function, this is the way to write it using a fat arrow. You might have heard this terminology, fat arrow, a lot of times if you have been using JavaScript. So today we'll see how to use a fat arrow. We will change this function into a fat arrow function. So all you need to do is have a constant name, const function name. The same name we'll give it to here, and you will have a equal to, open and close parentheses. We will have a fat arrow here, and if you need to, you can return. If you don't need to, that's fine. So console log, if there's just one item, it's okay. Person and location, and in the parameters we need to pass in the same thing, function location. So this is exactly the same as this function, and if I remove it, it's going to work exactly the same. See, it's exactly the same. So this is how you use arrow functions, and in React if you are using, you might have seen a lot of arrow functions. So this is just a modern way of writing function. There is nothing wrong or nothing different between these two types. So what is an array?
This is one of the most important data structure you'll find in an interview. So array is nothing more than a list of items stored in a straight or a linear order. So this is more of an ordered list. And in these lists, you can either save a string, either save a number, can even have a true boolean, can even have objects or null. Any data types which are available in JavaScript, you can store it in a form of an array. Okay, let's look at it by an example. So as you can see, the definition array is an ordered list of values. So constant names equals to empty array. This is how you initiate an array. And if I check console.log names, is going to give me an empty array. But in order to add something to it, console.log or I should say names.push and edurise. And now we'll check names. So it's going to give us edurise here. So here we are pushing an item. You don't need to worry about these methods because we are going to just discuss about it in a bit. But this is how you initiate an array. There's another way to initiate it, something like this: new array and open and close parentheses. This is going to initiate an empty array just like before, and then it's going to do its trick on it. So the result is going to be exactly the same. Okay, so now we need to understand which are the array methods. So we will go ahead and check these one by one. So what is push? Push is something when you have an array and you are trying to add something to the last location at this spot. In case this array length is 2, if you push into it something, it's going to be 3. So this is the use of push. Let's check it by example. Fruits, we have these 4. So if I do a run, it's going to give me nothing. Okay. Console log fruits. This is how we see it, right? Now if I add in fruits dot push, I know we have already seen it in the previous example, but let's try it again. Pineapple. So if I do a push, it's going to add to the last location. Second thing is about the pop. So this, what does pop do is that if you added anything to this list, it's going to pop out the last item. So pineapple will be removed. So let's say in here, if we have pushed pineapple. Now if we do fruits dot pop, and if we don't need to have anything in the parameter, but it's just going to do its trick. Okay, so pineapple is gone. Now if I add in one more fruit, so fruits dot push, and it's going to be strawberry, and then we will still have pineapple because the last pushed was strawberry, right? So that's the meaning of pop. It pops out the last item from an array. Okay, so the next thing here we need to check is shift. So shift will check both shift and unshift. So shift is something which is going to remove anything from the first index, and unshift is something which is going to add something to the first index. Okay, so first we'll check how we do shift. Okay, so now we need to remove banana. So shift banana, and if I I don't need to add banana because even though I have added it, it's not going to be of any significance. So if I just do a shift, it's going to go away. Fruits dot unshift, and if I type in unshift new fruit, right? So it's going to add that new fruit to the very first location. Okay, so next thing is about the length. Length is something which is going to give you the length of the total, how many are present in an array. So length, so it's going to give us this number. So when is this important in a real scenario is that let's say you have a list of likes. If you are creating Facebook and you get a list of likes, so now you need to display that how many people have liked something. You see more often, right, that there are 100 likes, and then you have this list. So when you click on that number, it's gonna open a list for you, and then you can see the names of which people have liked it. So that's the reason we need this length. Okay, so the next thing is about splice. Splice is something which is going to remove an item from its location. So there is one thing which you need to take care of. Array is a really big concept, and we will be making another separate video explaining a lot of things about array. But this is just a more common from an interview point of view. Fruits dot splice, and first we need to have a starting index. How many do you want to remove? So from the 0th location, I just want to remove 1, right? So it's going to be splice. Fruits is not defined. Oh, okay. Fruits. All right. So we have the 0th item, which is banana. It's gone. Let's say if I do 2 or 1, and we want to remove oranges. So banana, oranges is gone. So what this is saying is that start from this location. So starting from this index, or I should say, starting from the 0, 1, 2, and 3. Starting from this index, how many items do you want to remove? So right now I have assigned 1, right? So this is the one item it's going to remove, and it's going to return the next. If I type in 2 here, let's see what's going to happen. If I type in 2, the expected result is we should get banana and mango, right? So let's try to run it. Banana and mango. There you go. Okay, so as I said, array is a really complex thing. We cannot cover it in very short time, but this is how you do it. Okay, join. Join is something which you might use somewhere, but yeah, it's more like you would rarely use it, but this is important. So when you join something, it's going to join the whole array into one, and going to, if you don't pass in anything, it's going to assign it as a, what you can say, more with a comma in between. Okay, so let's check this join, and this is not going to return anything because we are not assigning it. So let's put this inside of this. Okay, you see it's joined, but it's joined by a comma. If I put in nothing, it's going to join by nothing, right? So there won't be any commas in. Okay, oh, here, there won't be any commas in between. If I put, let's say, end, it's going to join by end. So this is the there could be many use cases, but yeah, this is how you use join. Changing an element. This would be something really important for you when you are doing this. So it could be something like this, that fruits of, let's say, first index, you need to assign an index here. So 0, 1, 2, and 3. This is how it works. So right now I am changing the second index. So 0, 1, 2, apple. Instead of apple, what I want is that I want grapes. So if we see fruits here, it's going to be changed to grapes. See this? We don't have, okay, where is the last one? Oh, mango, okay. So we don't have apple anymore, we have grapes. The same thing you can do by deleting an item, and the way to delete it is delete fruits, and here you need to put a number which is going to be second, not grapes but apple. We are trying to delete apple. If I run it, it's going to remove it, but the problem here is that it's not going to remove that item, or it's going to keep an empty slot. So the best thing here to do is splice. So fruits and dot splice second and 1, and you don't even need to delete it, you just need to splice it, and that's it, it's going to go away. So this is important when you are doing delete is not too important when you are doing dealing with an array, but delete will be important when you are dealing with objects, which we'll look into it in just a bit. Another very important concept in JavaScript is objects. You'll use this objects every time because in JavaScript, everything is an object. Okay, so let's take a look at how to create an object. So object structure is something like this. You will have an curly brackets. You'll start and close it with a curly brackets, and this will have a key and a value paired to it. Key should always be a string no matter what. It cannot be a number or anything else. But values on the other end, it could be any data type which is allowed by JavaScript. Okay, let's take an example here. I will create, let's say I have a shop of cars, right? So constant cars, what is the name of the car? It's going to be something like name, and car is going to be Maruti, right? Let's say the build. When was this particular car built in? Let's say 2013. Let's say where is the location of, or go down location. Let's say it's in Austin. Let's try any other thing, maybe contact numbers or whatever. But another thing is that let's say if I want to have a list of buyers and who bought this car, and this is going to be an array. This is another data type. This is not a primitive data type, but it's an array, right? So it could be an array of objects. Let's say name of the person, whoever it is, XYZ, even phone number. So this list can go on and on. So all you need to understand right now is that in object you can assign whatever you want, and there could be even functions here. I can even create a function, let's say call someone, and it's going to have a function, arrow function, which is going to have a call phone, which is, let's say we created any other function. This is not a predefined function, but we will have to separately create it, something like this. So with objects you get a lot of flexibility in working around in your code. Okay, so there are a few methods which we need to check about objects. So the items here could be the how to access a property. So how can we access this particular name? Second thing could be how to delete a property. What if I just want to remove this property? Third thing is how can I add an item. So let's say I want to add the name. How to add name to, not the name, but we already have the name, but how can we add color? So that's something which we need to know. And also, what if my name is going to have a space here? So for example, what we can do here is that owner name. So let's say there is a space in between and I want to have it as a space. So how can I add this owner name into this particular object? We'll look into it in just a bit. Okay. So first thing first, how to access. So console log, and here we need to have cars, and to access there are two ways. One thing is using a dot notation, and dot, you see this not predefined, but we already have it, like build and name. Which do you want it? So let's say I want name. So if I run it, it's going to tell me that it's Maruti. Okay, another way doing it is have a square bracket, and in that type in name. So you can have build, which is 2013. You need to remember that you cannot have build something like this, because this is going to be looking something different. This means that it's a variable. So it's not going to give us anything because build is not defined. But if you type in let build equals to build, it's going to do the trick for us. But here, to make it simpler, just do something like this. That's it. Okay, so next thing is about deleting a property. Deleting is much simpler than an array. So console log and cars, and here we will do the delete. Cars dot, or I should say delete cars and build. So again, there are two ways to delete it. Right now we are doing this, so it's just going to return
Maruti, the name of the car, or we can even do build, and this is going to do the same thing for us. So it's going to give us this, right? Okay, so the next thing here would be adding a property. Adding a property is relatively simple. Here, cards, I can do color, and it's going to be black. And if we go in the cards, it's going to have a property name which is colors, right? Second thing here, what we can do is that maybe I just want to add dot colors, right? Color is going to do the same thing for us, right? And one more thing here is that accessing or adding a key with space here, right? So in here we will do owner name, let's say double. If we see it, it's going to give us a owner name. But you check, this is going to have a single quote. So in order to access this property, you need to have a single quote. So owner name. So with this, you will get the name of the owner. In case if you try to do the same thing with dot operation, owner name, it's not going to work, right? So this is something which you need to make sure that when you are having a property name with a space, you need to access it with a square notation or square bracket notation. One thing you also need to understand is that always try to have a non-spacing key names because that's much easier for everyone. So you might be wondering how to loop through an object. So there are two ways to do it. One is using in and another is using entries of. Okay, so the first thing about in is that you will simply have a for loop like before. Let I in, and you just need to write the object name. So cars, and this I will take all the property names, or I should say the keys. Console log I is going to give you all the keys. You can have cars I, and this is going to give you all the values, right? You can even have something like this, keys, key in cars, and just name it key and key. That's it. So you can have the key value pair here. Okay, so the next thing here is using entries. So this is interesting because it's going to give you the key value pair right away. For let key and value of object.entries, and in this object.entries you need to pass in this object name. You go through it, console.log key and value. So it's going to give you the key value pair here. Okay, it might take just a bit, but it's just a repel, not anything else. This is pretty instantaneous, but okay, let's see. Okay, there you go. So we have the key value. These names are not important because you can even have I and J, it doesn't matter. I and J. You can have your own key value names here. So these are the two ways how you can loop through an object. What is a closure? One of the most asked questions in a JavaScript or front-end interview. So the definition by MDN goes something like this. A closure is a combination of a function bundled together with reference to its surrounding state. In other words, a closure gives you access to an outer function scope from an inner function. In JavaScript, closure is created every time a function is created. Okay, so this is something which we need to understand, that every time in JavaScript when we create a function, we are already creating a closure. Though we know it or not, but a closure is being created. There is another sensible definition which I found, which you can use in your interview is this. A closure is a function that accesses its lexical scope even when executed, you need to understand this, when executed outside of its lexical scope. And we will, you can give this definition, because closure is one of the concepts which is hard to explain in an interview. So you can follow it up with an example, something like this. So you can just write a function, outer function, and we will create a variable var name equals to edurice, and inside of this we'll create another function inner function, and here we will console log name. Okay, so now as we can see here, let me make it a bit bigger. Okay, perfect. So now in this inner function, it's going to go at line number 14 and try to do a console log. It's trying to console log name, and it will check if name as a variable is present within this function. If not, it's going to look in the outer function or outside of this particular function or outside of this scope. It will find the name. Perfect. It will display it in the console here. If there is no name displayed here, it might check the global scope. If it is not present, it's going to give us undefined. At this stage, it is present, right? So now what we do is we are trying to call this inner function from within the scope. So within this lexical scope. Okay, inner function, we will run it, and let's try to call outer function. Okay, let's run it and see if we can display. Perfect. So we can see the name edurice. So here we need to know that this function is being called within this lexical scope. What if we want to call it outside, right? If we want to make this call somewhere outside, can we do it? And when we do it, the question is, will the name be accessible? Okay, let's take a look at it. Return inner function, we are going to return it. So whenever we do we call this function, it's going to return inner function. It's not calling a function, it's just returning a function, right? So we will do something like this. Let external function equals to outer function, right? And now we will call, or we will run it. So external function and open close parenthesis. So you are calling this inner function. So let's see if we have name accessible here as well. Perfect. Let's give it a try, edurisers, and let's see if it's the same. Just want to see if it's not cache. I know it. I just wanted to display it to you guys. So let's try to stop it again. There are sometimes this lag from Ripple IT, but let's take a look again. Okay, it's taking a bit longer. Perfect, we have it. So there you go. So now, even if we are calling it from outside, we do have access to this lexical scope variables. So that's the reason. Let's take a look at this definition again. A closure is a function that accesses its lexical scope. So we have access in this lexical scope even when executed from outside of its lexical scope. So the execution takes place outside. It doesn't happen here. It's happening outside. So this is one of the most logical definition which I found, which you can use in your interview anytime, and it can follow up with an example. So the interviewer would be happy that you pretty much know the definition, and more importantly, you know how to utilize it. So this is exactly what is closure. So what is a class? A class in JavaScript is simply a blueprint for creating objects. A class encapsulates data. Anything within that particular class data has been stored. You cannot manipulate it. Even the functions within that particular class can manipulate its own data. We'll look at it by an example, so you don't need to worry about that. So unlike any other programming language such as Java and C#, yes, one main thing here is that JavaScript classes are just syntactic sugar. For example, it's just a function which is being made to work like a class. So this was introduced in ES6. Alright, so let's take a look at what exactly is a class. So if we look at it by an example, let's take an example of animals. So I want to create a class of animals. Class animal, and the syntax goes like this. We don't open and close parentheses here, just like function. We just have name of the class animal, and here I will have a constructor. Constructor is any initial value which I want to give. So right now I'm going to give name and count. Let's say we want to count the animals. This dot name is equal to name, and this dot count is equal to count. So what we are doing over here is that we give an initial name and count. If we don't give anything, it's going to be undefined. So we give an initial name and count into this values. So anything which starts with this is contained within this particular class. So here what's going to happen is that if I do a in order to use this class, you need to assign it. So let lion, let's say I want to have a list of lions. Lions new animal. So if I do a console log for lions, I will have undefined, something like this. See this, animal is the class and count is undefined. Let's say if I give the initial name and count to it. So lion and count will be, let's say we have 100 lions, right? So it's going to be something like this. I can do exactly the same thing for, let's say, dogs. New animal, dog, and let's say I have 50 dogs. Perfect. So, okay, let me console log it so we can see it. Console dogs. Perfect. We run it. We see that there are lions and dogs. Let's say I want to create a function in it, and this function is going to increment or decrement the count. Let's say there is birth in the lion or dog pack, right? So birth is going to be a function. We don't need to write function here. So this dot count plus equals to, and here we will have the numbers, num, and I will simply add it by num. And the same thing I'll do here for, let's say, death, right? So death, we will have the same thing for death, and it's going to be decrement. Perfect. So now let's take a look that lions had a birth of 10, right? So lions dot birth, and we will put a number 10. Let's take a look at the number. So we see that the number incremented. The same thing we can do that. There are deaths in dogs, death, and the count is, let's say, 5, right? Okay. So this is how you can manipulate, and you see here that the count and name is more specific to which items it's assigned to. So lions, it doesn't interfere with the dogs, and dogs counts don't interfere with the lions. So this is the purpose of class. We will go into the further explanation of classes in any other video, but this is rarely asked in an interview, but whenever it is being asked, you can easily explain it. So what is a promise? A promise is a object representation of an eventual completion or failure of an asynchronous operation and its resulting value. Let's take a look at it by an example, and after that we'll come to the states. Okay, so the example is, if I have $10, I promise to give you $10. If I don't, I cannot give you anything, right? In that case, let's create a promise here. It will be something like this. Let promise equals to new promise, and it will take in a function, and the function first parameter will be resolved, second will be rejected, and first one, let's say if here I'll say let my balance equals to $5, right? And if my balance is greater than 10 greater than or equal to 10, resolve 10 given, or I should say $10 given, or else reject can't give $10, right? And here if you want to run a promise, or if you want to start it, promise dot then, and in this we will pass in another function. So the first parameter will be, not the first, but the final parameter will be resolve. So whatever we get it from this particular resolve, it will be displayed here. Console log result, this is not resolve but result. If it fails, then we need to catch it, right? Catch, and again we pass in a function, and here we will have error message, console.log error, right? So right now we have $5 in my balance, so it will be less than 10, and it's going to give us this message. If we run it, it says pending, reject is not defined because we made a mistake here. It should be reject, not rejected. Okay, it's taking a bit, but okay, perfect, we have it. Can't give $10. Now let's say if I have $15 in my account, it's going to give us a resolve saying that $10 given, right? Here you see promise pending because it's returning, and right now you don't need to worry about this. This is what we should care about at the moment. Okay, so when you are asked a question like this in an interview, you can say that a promise is an object representation of an eventual completion or failure. Completion is with resolved, and failure is handled with rejected, and anything in between is pending, something like this. So they might even ask you that which are the stages of or states of promises. So there are 3 states. One is pending, one is fulfilled, or we can even say resolved, and the other one is rejected. So this question you might be asked a lot of times in your front end or any JavaScript interviews. I was asked this at Google. At the same time, I was asked it in eBay. So this is an important question. You make sure not to forget preparing this.